and you're almost coding at the speed of thought, like just how quickly it's responding, which is really freaky, annoying when it gets it wrong. Quoting another YouTuber, he said it's like having Einstein in your basement, being able to ask him anything whenever you want, as many times as you want. Because if you know the right questions to ask, you can get very effective answers. I think that shift is going to be really interesting to see what it means to be a software engineering expert, people that are really masters of their field.
A operational leader in a big organization, their very career and reputation and relationships are on the line. AI doesn't have a concept of survival. No. That airplane, whether it crashes or not, does it really care?
AI doesn't
care. Should we make AI care?
Baseline.
Can you give me a detailed understanding of what Cursor is, how it works, and the value it brings?
You have a tool called VS Code. You can code pretty much any language with it. Copilot was released from GitHub. This was huge. I remember when it came out, everyone was talking about it. That changed to Copilot finishing your sentences for you. Cursor is a fork of VS Code, so it's the same thing, but a company took it away, re-engineered it to be AI first and agentic. That's what makes Cursor so much more powerful than VS Code with Copilot. AI has kind of come out in the last year or two in my role professionally. I think where I work now, they've really taken it on head first and said it's going to make us all pretty productive. But I think what my experience is mainly in is really high stakes, low latency systems. And those, it's really interesting for me, particularly with AI, is every detail matters with what I do. And as you were talking about with startups, that's not necessarily the case. It's how do we get a product built for our target clients or customers as quickly and sometimes as cheaply as possible, right? Like how do we get something that just we can sell? And then we, build on it, tweak it, fine tune it. But for me, it's a very careful approach. It's like, you need to make sure you understand what the AI is telling you to write, and you need to really take what it gives you and go, is that right? Has it messed anything up? And I've seen it mess up a lot. It gets a lot wrong. And if you don't catch that in systems where billions of dollars are flowing through it, it can be devastating, right?
When you talk about low latency, high risk, maybe take me through what that means.
So especially in like financial systems, execution systems I've worked on, the metric that a lot of people talk about is like tick to trade. You identify an opportunity and you go after it as quickly as you can. And we're talking like nanoseconds. You want to be able to place your order as quickly as you can. And that there's a lot of tricks you can use, like, co-location, zero allocation, memory. So it's a lot of that stuff requires experts in, infrastructure and architecture and knowing that you can't allocate anything when you're on the hot path and all these little details that make your system like blazing fast. And not only do you have to do that, but you have to also be very conscious that, as I've said, like billions of dollars is flowing through your code. So like you need to know what you're doing, right? The fundamentals need to be there. You need to know computer science inside and out, like the back of your hand. And I think that I only say that because with AI and things like, I've heard about vibe coding things, you as an engineer aren't really caring about those details anymore. You're kind of just almost delegating the thought to someone else and just kind of rubber stamping what you're given back. And that, I think, for me and what I've seen in my role is we're taking extra care as a team and saying, right, when we code, do we understand what it's giving us? If we're going to get those efficiency gains, at what cost is that coming at, you know?
The this AI phase we're going through. So when you're talking, I'm thinking, is it appropriate for the work you're doing based on its potential hallucination or its inaccuracy? It may not be the right technology for what you're building.
I think it has its place. For what I use it for is like a learning tool. You know, if I come across something new, it's like having access, like kind of quoting another YouTuber here, he said it's like having Einstein in your basement, you know, and being able to ask him anything whenever you want, as many times as you want. And I think it's really good because with what I'm doing, AI is not just used to like code, right? It's used to learn. You use it to help draft emails. You know, if you're feeling conscious about something, you know, you double check and say, am I being a bit crazy here? You know, and AI is really good at being almost like, you know, an extremely like, what's it, like competent co-worker that never gets sick of you kind of thing.
So do you see it very much like that? Is it a live augmentation, general purpose augmentation to everything you do?
Yeah, I think it touches everything I do. And as an engineer, I'm not just writing code, you know, I'm working in a team. Like, how do I affect positive change in the teams I work in? How do I, you know, make things more efficient? And as you say, documentation, how do I make sure for future coders that come in to like the code bases I work in, you know, how do I make sure it's incredibly maintainable and easy to pick up for future contributors? And AI really helps with all that stuff, all the stuff like admin stuff you don't really want to spend time doing. It really like saves a lot of time. So I think I can focus on what matters and what I'm hired to do, which is write the code. Yeah.
This urge to humanize technology, you know, you've referenced it there as Einstein in your basement.
Yeah.
Which feels slightly dystopian
Yeah.
for Einstein.
Yeah.
But or as a co-worker. Is it this general purpose digital assistant that we're naturally humanizing, and therefore it's coming into our domain of trust because of the way it uses language? You know, do you think we will see that humanization?
Yeah, it's already happening. And I think it's because we talk to it, and it's the responses it gives. It almost invites building that trust. Like when I talk to it in my personal life or about engineering, it's collaborative. It says, give me more. And it's purely because of how LLMs work, right? The more context you give them, the better the response, you know, with like the underlying research with building the relationships between the words, and attention is all you need and all that stuff is the more context you give it, the better the response. And so I think the way they've engineered these systems is to invite more context just so they can perform better. But the side effect is that we give it more, and the human part of us says, it cares. It cares about what I'm saying. You know, you trust people that care about what you're saying, and sometimes it's vulnerable stuff you talk about. Sometimes it's just, you know, how do I implement this depth first search on my bit of code, you know, but it actually cares and it doesn't ever get tired like of you. And I think that a lot of people connect with that in a way. Yeah.
Does it care?
No, it doesn't, but it feels like it does, which is the crazy thing, right?
It sounds so seductive that it has the potential to replace human-to-human relationships.
Maybe not replace, but it
be
definitely
preferred over.
Yeah. Because for my job as an engineer, we're all so busy, and I know that, you know, I'm mentoring engineers in my team, and they often say they don't want to bother me, you know, because I'm clearly like focusing. And I'm like, no, don't worry about that. Right. It's all good. Just ask me. But with AI, you're never afraid to ask it. You're never afraid you're asking too many questions because everyone's aware it's an app running on a server rack somewhere. It's not genuinely like Einstein in your basement, you know. Yeah, so I think that's where it's really powerful, is that it replaces that need to talk to someone and that mental overload of, oh, am I bothering them? I've got to wait till they're finished in that meeting. It's always there. It's always available, which is really powerful. And I think for me I'm kind of growing into engineering leadership, and the place it's most powerful for me and where I'm really happy it exists is you want your team to be unblocked, right? You want them to be able to be productive writing code. And if they're stuck, you want them to be autonomous in finding how to get out of being stuck. And before AI, that meant talking to other people, finding the right people to help get them through the problem that they're stuck on. And AI is so good at unblocking people because you can just ask it, I'm not sure how to fix this. And it's trained on just the internet, right? Like knowledge. So it's, for engineering leaders, so like great because, you know, teams can flow easier, which is really nice.
I've seen this. I mean, this is fascinating. This idea of, the thing I want to analyze here is, why are human relationships so blocking? And I remember where this kind of began for me was when I used to ask people questions in a professional context, and they would respond, "Why don't you just Google it?"
That's not.
And when it used to annoy me.
Yeah.
Because a component of why I was asking that person was because I respected them as an individual.
Right.
And therefore was interested in their individual perspective on the answer to the question.
Yeah.
So when humans started saying, "Why don't you just Google it?" Human relationships became blocking.
Yeah.
And not unblocking.
Yeah.
And once somebody said to you, "Just Google it" a few times, you never want to ask them anything again.
No. Yeah.
So are humans themselves part of their own disconnective, move into their own disconnective phase by being blocking? I'm too busy and I'm in a meeting. Why don't you just Google it? There's an easier unblocking technological answer than us having to have an engagement.
I think there's, yeah.
Why has that happened?
Not everyone is a talented mentor or collaborator, and I think that is a skill that's quite hard to find, in especially with engineers. They're not people right there, and it's very rare you find those people that are willing. Like when I think about the best mentors and managers I've worked with, or like senior engineers in my life, my career, they've always had that willingness to share and talk, but also, as you say, that individual perspective. Like the way they talk is inspiring. The way they reason about problems is really, you just learn so much from it. And those conversations, naturally, you get so much else out of it. You're asking one question, but you walk away with like 5 other things you didn't even know about. You know, it's a classic thing, right? You don't know what you don't know. And you're right that the other kind of people that don't necessarily want to be bothered, and they see collaboration as a necessity to the job, they don't really like having to work with other people. That is something that exists, and unfortunately, but I think it has caused things like AI to be so attractive and allows it to exist like it does. But I don't think it exists because of, professionals like that.
As a leader or an engineering lead, what are you doing to ensure that you can offer your team human to human unblocking, if you like?
Yeah, it's always like, I do work in the office. It's like hybrid, and I make sure that we're all kind of in on the same days, because you just see what that gives. And I think naturally with my team, it's almost an unsaid thing, like how much more effective it is. Yeah, we always have meetings, go for lunch with each other when we're stuck, and make it like, you say, when running a high performing engineering team, you hear the words like psychological safety, open communication, autonomy. These are all characteristics, and they're all very human characteristics. You need to be a very empathetic leader to run a team with those qualities. And to make sure you've got those things, you absolutely need that human connection that you're kind of talking about. You don't want a team that's just Googling everything and spending hours trying to figure out for themselves. So, I do always say, if you're blocked, ask AI first and then talk to me if you think it might be trivial. But always never making anyone else feel like they're inconveniencing someone. Because
Do you still have like stand-ups and playbacks as a team where you get together, or is like, I think about waterfall to agile. Agile, whether it's been successful or not, is like a whole different conversation. But there certainly was a function of, Scrum Master, and there was a function of human roles. How is that changing?
I don't see the way teams being run changing at all. I think we do stand-ups, we do, backlog refinement, all the things, sprint retros. I can see how AI can supplement those and be like, if you really put a lot of time in, having AI consume all the tickets you've done, all the work you've done, summarizing everything for you, being able to interact with it. But from what I've seen, AI has really steeped itself in the practical work first, and project management has not really changed yet. I think it will, like in the future, when they figure out like how it can make project management more efficient and more, interactable. But it's not something I've seen yet.
So your background around Go, Rust, Python, C, your perspective on software engineering, how has that evolved over your career? And, what are the things that are really changing right now?
I think over my career, when I started, I was 14, just like doing iOS development. And up until 2 years ago, just like almost a decade, it felt like software engineering was kind of cemented, and it was like what my career was going to look like when it came to learning and doing, and what it meant to be a senior engineer. I wanted to do air quotes there, so it's just different everywhere. It's felt like it was going to be in quite an expected path. And I look at more senior people I worked with, and I thought, the journey they've been on is the journey I would hope to be on. And you just get better and better. You learn more. You learn how to code good systems. And now it's changed. Like, so many people have so many different takes on AI and what it's going to mean for the job. And no one's quite figured it out yet. But, people are afraid that a team of a senior engineer and 5 juniors is going to become a senior engineer and an AI, So we're undergoing such rapid change in software engineering, and it's not quite landed yet. And I think there's like, the answer was obvious, we would have decided already, but what people are playing with is what we were just discussing at the beginning, which is, can I run a startup with no engineers for its first year? You know, it's very different to before, where you had your experts were people and you needed those people to build. And now it's, do I need those people? Do I need as many people? Yeah, and it's changing also with those experts. Those experts had fundamental knowledge, right? They are valuable to a business because they have a bedrock of one, knowledge, and two, experience. And now we're seeing a shift in, someone knows how to use an AI, but they don't have that bedrock of experience. Can they still deliver, you know, for a company? And I think in a lot of cases they can. You know, you don't need to have someone in a room that is an expert in like kernel development in Rust, right? It's like, because it's like this arcane magic. Now you have your expert is someone that knows how to talk to an AI effectively, and they can learn like this, like rapid. So now, do you even need kernel experts? Like, you know, these wizards, because if you know the right questions to ask, you can get pretty effective answers. I think that shift is going to be really interesting to see what it means to be a software engineering expert. You know, people that are really masters of their field. I think that's going to change. The job description is going to change. Yeah.
They must feel, I mean, if I was a kernel expert, I would be almost annoyed that there was an assumption that you could replace my experience, knowledge, specific domain learnings, maybe my anecdotal value with some form of coded system. But and I hugely empathize with that resistance. Yeah. But if we come back to your point on blocking versus unblocking, if these people are not super open communicators and open to support and share that knowledge, they're done.
Yeah.
They're done.
Yeah.
So I think that the idea that the generation that invested hugely in experience and knowledge and then somehow retained it and took an approach that they would essentially make people pay to play if they wanted to access that, it's over for them. So to your point, this idea of the engineering of the prompt, knowing which questions to ask, people will have a I don't know what I don't know blind spot at the moment with coding. Yeah. Like I don't even know what I don't know about questions to ask about kernel development.
Right.
But, OpenAI and Google, they're working on models to generate entire applications from relatively simple prompts. So, this change in coding is happening quite quickly.
Yeah.
Those experts, are they just now digital libraries, digital functions?
I think you're right. The you don't know what we don't know thing is really important. So as an example of a blog post, like a coworker showed me of how someone made a game using AI only, and they didn't know how to really code. They just went in and said, it's kind of funny to them. And it's how I can make a game. I don't even know how to code. I'm just going to get AI to do it. And they started making money off of it as well. But they got like mega hacked because it had no security controls, and they just got absolutely it was hilarious. And it's because they didn't know anything about security. I mean, they didn't know how to code either, but the AI didn't ever stop and go, are you going to release this? Have you oh, you're putting this into production? Have you like considered everything that you need to do to like put software out in front of people? And they didn't know, obviously, to that, you know, if you're making something that's open to a network, you've got to have all these security controls. And that like made me go, whoa, hold on. Like, of course, LLMs, if you don't give them the context, then they're not engineered to go, have you considered all this stuff, unless you specifically tell it to. And that made me think, you know, how much of my work that has been supplemented by AI, how much of what I've delivered is missing something and I don't even know, you know.
That's frightening, Brendon.
Yeah.
That's frightening.
Yeah. I think everyone that uses AI and has delivered something.
It feels like there should be some shared corporate memory
Yeah.
that overlays every individual's AI prompt with a set of corporate governance / policy / values that would say it wraps any individual's prompt with you know, the values and the functions of the business itself.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So no matter who you are, head of marketing, somebody putting an advert together, somebody writing code, somehow that prompt is being augmented with a set of principled prompts that ensure the blind spot is covered.
Yeah. And I think that is the next step. And then we got to figure it out all over again, you know, what it means for the job and everything. But that would, that would make it a lot more powerful, because then suddenly that's almost like, you know, when you start a new job at a big company, you go for all this training. Right now, when AI is almost like untrained employees that you're working with, they're just super geniuses. But yeah, as you say, they're not trained. They don't know the culture you're trying to fit into. They don't know the, you know, rest of the code base. Until you had things like Cursor, which came along and which tokenize everything.
Can you give me a detailed understanding of what Cursor is, how it works, and the value it brings?
Yes, so it might be better to talk about what was before it, at least what I used, and then what Cursor is compared to that. So you have a tool called VS Code, which is very popular, and it's kind of the text editor of choice for a lot of engineers I know. And it's because it's so flexible. It's open source. You can put extensions into it. You can code pretty much any language with it.
So is this when an engineer is writing new code, they use VS Text Editor?
Yeah, the VS Code, yeah.
I'm not frightened of asking this stupid questions.
No, don't
but
worry.
This is essentially their kind of Microsoft Word of coding.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then Copilot was released from GitHub, and that was an extension where you could... This was huge. I remember when it came out, everyone was talking about it.
When was this, Brendon?
I think it was last year or the year before.
Okay, recent.
Very recent. And it was just something you plugged into VS Code. So you'd be writing code previously in the past, and all it would really do alongside you was show you errors or where you've missed like a semicolon, and it like flags up in red, says, oh, you've missed something here. This won't
a little bit like if you've made a typo, maybe spelled something wrong. Okay.
Yeah. And that changed to Copilot finishing your sentences for you.
Oh.
So it would be generative and say, you know, generative models are predictive in nature. And it would take only the context of the file you were working in and saying, oh, I think you're going to do this next. And you could also ask it questions and say, can you write unit test for me? Can you like test this code for me? And it would generate tests for you, which was really powerful. And you had a chat as well you could talk to. But Cursor, so where it's different is that Cursor is a fork of VS Code, so it's the same thing. But a company took it away and kind of re-engineered the guts of it to be AI first and agentic. And what that means is in Cursor, you've got your code base, you open it in VS Code, and it tokenizes as much as it can, like pretty much all of it.
What does tokenize mean?
So in LLMs, tokenizing is the input. If you imagine putting text into the model, it gets tokenized, which means it kind of gets cut up. And,
like the training data?
The input, it's like what you type in.
The prompt?
Yeah, the prompt. It gets tokenized. And so that word, just imagine you're not prompting anything, but when it's tokenizing and putting your code base into the model, it really means it's giving it that context alongside everything you're asking it to do. And that's what makes Cursor so much more powerful than VS Code with Copilot, is that it has the context of the entire application that you're building, so it can predict much more accurately and also much more helpfully. And it doesn't just finish your, like, the rest of the line of code you're trying to write, which is what Copilot does. It's like so like crazy that it can do things inline and modify the rest of the code that has already been written. So if it can like detect that you're changing a variable or you're going through a big bunch of test data and you're removing like slashes from it, it will figure out you're doing that, and then like you just press tab and it changes the whole thing. Like I've seen it really. I was working on something and it just like shows you this box and you just press tab and it changes it for you, and you're almost coding at the speed of thought, like just how quickly it's responding, which is really freaky, annoying when it gets it wrong, because when you're coding, you in your head have the solution and you're writing out the code, and sometimes it messes it up and it keeps like flashing the suggestions, and I have to be like, no, and then it gets it. It's like, oh yeah, okay. But yeah, it's really, Cursor's really transforming the way people code.
Coding at the speed of thought.
Yeah.
Brendon, that's amazing.
Yeah.
So can you VS versus VS Augmented with GitHub Copilot versus Cursor? If it took me 10 hours or 8 hours in the first iteration, what are the time savings? Is that a silly question? I'm trying to work out what a meaningful rate of work and cost of work, the impact on that is, in your experience.
Yeah. I think it really, it's hard to quantify in time. What's more important as a metric, I think, is the mental load it takes to build an application, and that will have the knock-on effect of time savings, which is when you're writing code, you have to write tests and you have to write documentation around your code so that it's readable for others, and you have to, if you're using languages like C#, there's loads of boilerplate you have to write, which is just kind of, it's stuff you don't really have to think about, but you got to do it. And that stuff, it's the stamina, right? The fatigue. That stuff chips away at stamina and fatigue. And with Cursor, and as we're evolving the IDE, the amount we have to think about the boilerplate documentation stuff has rapidly gone down. So you have way more time and energy to think about the actual problem you're solving, the hard bit, right? The algorithms, the business logic. And that's where it's really augmented, at least the work I do, where I can...
Oh, so this is qualitative.
Yeah,
You're going much deeper into the cognitive analysis of the solution and the problem, because the meta load of actually building the product is gone. So you can spend your time deep in the challenge.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what things like Cursor are really good at enabling, is you can just, when I say press tab, because in Cursor you just press tab and it auto completes, you can just press tab on that stuff. before you'd have to dedicate like an hour to it. So I've got to dedicate an hour to documentation. It's really important to not leave that stuff out. But yeah, now it's just like handled, and you've got, as I say, the mental stamina to now have much more high quality solutions, like think about what matters.
Brendon, what you're saying is mapping to something I've seen recently, and including in the UK Parliament this last week. And somebody came up with this point that somehow because of AI, human cognition is going to emaciate, and our ability to mentally process and think is going to reduce because AI is going to take that load. I fundamentally disagree with that. As I sit here now, I may change my view over time, but my experience has been, and it's resonating with what you're saying. What you're saying is resonating because actually using ChatGPT and others, it's allowed me to learn and think about problems I would never have traditionally had access to, and I'd have been wrestling with the writing the content or the act of. But actually, I now get much deeper knowledge and penetration into the data around the problem or the thing I'm trying to learn about, as opposed to 60% of my time wrangling with the tools. So I would actually say, from a personal perspective, AI has enabled me to be a deeper, cleaner thinker about the things I'm actually trying to get my head around. Does that align? I mean,
yeah. I think not for everything. I kind of get what those people are saying, though.
In what way?
So,
do you think the reduction of human cognitive ability is a genuine risk?
Yeah. Because for me, it's with like writing emails. Sometimes I use AI to just check I'm not sounding insane. Or, you have that like anxious thing, like, oh, is that right? Is that the right way to word things? And I think it's really important that people still go through that themselves, that process, like come across naturally them. And in like 10 years, when we delegate all that stuff to AI, it's people aren't be thinking for themselves or like how to portray themselves, their personal brands, like all these things might disappear. And I think there's a risk of that.
Or because we all normalize around the way AI speaks.
Yeah. Like there are people that say now, and they're seeing a lot more CVs that say words like
deep dive.
Yeah, deep dive, spearheaded, stuff that no one ever used those words before.
I love an I love an M dash and a deep dive.
Yeah. Exactly.
My common prompt in all of my projects is no M dashes, no deep dives, and UK English, not American English.
Yeah.
But if using those tools is allowing that person to access conversations and knowledge and relationships that they wouldn't have previously, is that not a good thing? Or is everybody becoming increasingly imposter syndrome? Because it's a little bit like catfishing intelligence. Like it's easy to portray intelligence by hiding behind a GPT, but fundamentally you're going to get into a room and somebody's going to ask you some questions, and they're going to kind of realize you're not intellectually aligned with the way you presented yourself digitally. Does that not push people away from human interaction as the GPT becomes their persona?
Yeah, no, it does. Like think about, if you were someone that only had professional confidence when you had access to AI or GPT, you would do whatever you could to always be with it. So you would avoid those scenarios where you're, talking with someone without it, like this, right? Us talking now, neither of us are relaying everything we're saying. Yeah,
I'm nowhere near as clever as people think. I don't think. Look, I'll be honest. I did a complex prompt to get good, clever questions because the reality is, Brendon, I don't want to let you down by not being able to ask you the right questions.
But that's the thing, like
so I've tried to augment my engineering development knowledge by using generative AI to at least give me to give me pointers on the right questions or direction of the conversation. Now,
that's good.
You're extremely skilled in the way you communicate. Because you're slow and thoughtful, and I am absorbing. I'm particularly enjoying this conversation. But yes, I would say that this conversation from my side is to a small degree augmented.
Yeah, because think about, let's say we were just talking about software engineering 5 years ago. We didn't have AI, and it would be a different conversation. I guess you'd have to ask a lot more questions. You'd have to. Would you have even known to ask about Cursor or the equivalent Cursor? Like, probably not, unless I brought it up.
Well, it's back to the point of I don't know what I don't know.
Yeah.
Let's get back on track. I mean, Cursor, fantastic. Vibe coding is this hot topic where we're moving to, conversational interaction, language prompts, natural language. I would say the one thing that I am not doing well at the moment is typing. My typing seems to be worse than it's ever been. I don't know whether that's just, the decline of my nervous system as I get older, or the fact that I want to be able to interact at my speed of thought.
Right.
So I think something, I'm like, bash, 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 bash. Typing's horrendous, but it interprets it and it comes back with quality content anyways. So my typing, my interaction with the machine is fundamentally emaciating to ideally be replaced with real-time thought and language. Is vibe coding something similar where we're moving to conversational prompting, more dynamic ways of interacting with code? Is that something that's happening in the engineering world?
As I was saying, with what my team does with kind of like the high risk systems, it sounds like with AI, we're just too far away from being able to trust it to deliver safe, performant code just naturally. So I've not seen it too much in my world, but I've heard a lot of things from the kind of startup scene or people that do a lot of hobby programming really find it interesting, and they think the interface and the paradigms that programming offers is going to change. So instead of, writing code in a command line interface, they think it's going to change to be more graphical, and the way we build applications is going to completely change because it's not writing text in a window, it's talking. So now it's going to look, why does there need to be text if you're not yourself coding, right? Yeah. It's really for vibe coding. It's such an interesting name. It sounds like a brand almost. Yeah. It's not something I have too much experience with firsthand, but hearing a lot about it. So it's something I want to try.
Well, some of your points on earlier around debugging and what happens after code is in production. The idea that if we're using AI to build applications, once they're actually then floated into production, is there an ongoing issue with understanding the way they work and understanding how to fix them when they go wrong, or not being able to predict their certain behaviors?
Yeah. I was thinking about this a lot. There was an incident at work. An incident is when a production system, goes wrong and it's affecting the client and they can't use the system, or, they're blocked from trading. And I was thinking a lot about, AI. You wake someone up at 4 a.m. and you say, we need to fix this as soon as possible. They've never seen this code before. It's really, there's no comments because the AI didn't want to write comments. It's really hard to reason about. There's no tests. And I was thinking, for production systems, you need people that understand how it works to maintain it and keep it going. You wouldn't ever get in a plane that, was never really tested by people. And I think with, these production systems, there's so much to consider alongside just code that works. You need it to be really thought out, all the edge cases tested. you sometimes want to A/B test it, give it to different people, try out new things. You know, you need something that scales for, you know, one day you've got 5 people using it, the next you've got 5 million people using it. And a lot of things can make a production system go down, and you need people that understand, I think, the code they've released. It feels like kind of silly and obvious, but we are converging towards like people considering, can they release code they don't understand?
Well, you've used 2 examples there that are fundamentally playing into the quality is driven by the human survival instinct. And, you know, discussions I've had on Baseline about airplanes with no pilots, there's obviously a feeling that if you're on an airplane with a pilot, that pilot is going to operate in a safe manner because they kind of want to stay alive themselves.
Yeah.
So you're in this shared risk motion when you're on an aeroplane with all of the people on the plane managing and running the plane with you. So you're in this equilateral system of risk. I would say not dissimilar to, you know, a operational leader in a big organization who is singularly accountable for the stability and uptime of production applications. Their very career and reputation and relationships are on the line if they don't deliver on the quality they're expected to deliver. So it's survival, right? AI doesn't have a concept of survival.
No. Yeah.
So losing that human dynamic, does it lose something from the objective intent of the system in which it's been applied? That aeroplane, whether it crashes or not, does it really care?
AI doesn't care.
If it's a couple of lines of code.
Yeah.
Should we make AI care? Should there be a risk of it being deleted if it doesn't perform, so it thinks, does extra thinking? I mean, this is crazy thinking, but do you see what I'm trying to say in terms of that professional commitment to the outcome is not there in the machine?
Yeah.
And does that matter? Maybe it doesn't matter.
It does, because everyone's made mistakes in their career, and I've made mistakes, and they have shaped and changed me. There are certain incidents I'll never forget that, you know, I've written code where it's caused an outage, and every single line of code, it sticks with me, that where I've made that mistake, and I thought, you know, it's made me grow, it's made me mature, and I've thought, okay, every time I write code or build a system, all my past mistakes are with me. And any seasoned engineer will tell you the same thing, that I think what makes them good is knowing that craftsmanship and care for your work is driven by, I guess, not only the fear of messing up, but passion as well, that you want to be recognized for doing good work. And AI doesn't have that. It's not prompted to say, act like your career depends on this, or write code as if you're really, really afraid of causing an incident, you know. So I think you're right. It's something, it feels silly to say, do we somehow code fear into AI? Because it's like, what does that mean? But if we are going to run with it, and we are going to use it in our professional tools, it might be necessary to do that. You know?
It's a fascinating area, and I'm trying to work out whether these discussions are just on the wrong side of the reality of, you know, highly digital driven progress. But I think they're worth having because it's a transition from something we know and understand. The discussion that we've had there is very much, you know, the journey of human life, how we start young and to an extent naive, not shaped by war wounds or experience, and we progress through life, hopefully pushing the boundaries, you know, learning. Sometimes we win, sometimes we lose, and over time that softens us and smooths us into somewhat more professional, wise being.
Yeah.
It's the very nature of life. AI hasn't or doesn't, the language model, I don't believe, represents that. Or are we just getting all of those learnings into the original language models and therefore it's already crafted to
might be bought in.
risk averse? I don't fully understand, because we're certainly not in a closed general purpose AI, because you don't know, has it been trained on documents that have come from wisdom, or is it both? And how do the weights work?
Yeah.
It starts to make me think that the AI systems that we trust in to build things, we need a little bit more transparency on the weights of behavior.
Yeah. I mean, that was always the goal, I think, with companies like OpenAI. It's in their name. They wanted to be open and say, this is how we've trained it. This is what the weights look like. And obviously that's all changed now. They're a bit more closed because there's a lot of profit. Maybe, I don't know, but there is a lot of money to be made. But I think you're right. The transparency is really, really important. Obviously no one needs to publish a massive spreadsheet of weights for trillions of variables, but maybe being a bit more transparent on what it's been engineered to bias or lean towards. Because, the training process, what you do is you have this goal and it predicts how to get to that goal. And then in your training data, you say yes or no, you've got it right, or you need to try again and do backwards propagation. But yeah, I think it could be really important. It's really weird, actually. Like, you're saying kind of, can we demand this as the people, the users, what do you think like that might look like, us asking for more transparency from companies?
Oh, I would suggest that the way capitalism has always worked, use the products that offer that level of transparency, and they will be preferred in the market.
There's
but ease of use seems to trump transparency.
Yeah, look at like Claude from Anthropic. I think that's what they're called. The reason I use that personally is because their security, they've said, their privacy matters to them, and your inputs aren't training the system, so you can be a bit more, I guess, open with it without fear that it's constantly data mining you. Well, some people are very honest with their AIs, right? And it's that trusting that you mentioned. Once you trust it, you start being vulnerable with it. And I know a lot of people that use it as a therapist. Therapists traditionally, you sign something that says, unless you say something really, really worrying, they are contractually bound to not share that with any other person. What you talk about in those sessions. And for people to say they're using AI as a therapist means they're telling AI those very sensitive things about themselves. And I think that's why it matters. Is it's really important that there's a trust there. And I think people aren't warned well enough, maybe, that the things they're saying are shared and not kept secret, Yeah.
What advice would you give to developers who are getting into development at the moment in terms of where they should be putting their areas of focus to be relevant in this era of AI integrated or led development and engineering?
Learn the fundamentals, like respect the craft, like number one, for sure. Like, it's even before AI, I got a bit afraid that languages like the Python programming language were creating a breed of programmers that just didn't know the fundamentals when it came to memory management, crafting good production code. A lot of the things that really matter, Python kind of abstracts away and hides from you. Even type safety, which is a really important thing in programming. You can write Python code that's not typed, which, I've seen in production systems, and it just makes it really messy and hard to work with. And that was like stage one. I think that's okay, because it's almost like if you learn Python, you're probably going to learn something else, and you'll end up learning those fundamentals anyway. But with AI, it's like step two, which is you're going to be a professional programmer. You have the option to not even learn one programming language properly. It's very tempting to become just extraordinarily productive knowing how to prompt AI. And I think that is going to be very tempting. People are going to see they can get jobs very quickly. But my advice would be learn those fundamentals, like dive in, do the work, build programs without AI first, make the mistakes, write code that doesn't work, figure it out, debug it. Because AI can just give you a solution in a nicely wrapped box. Like, what good is that, right?
You're at the forefront of the application of AI in building applications, and extremely important applications that are handling financial transactions and all sorts of other critical systems. You've worked across quantitative trading, you've been involved in high value sub-millisecond decisions that are critical to financial stability of huge organizations. And now you're leading software engineering across a number of industries. You have a very thoughtful, human, values-led approach, but you can clearly see, whether it be going from traditional to GitHub Copilot to Cursor, you can see the value. Brendon, do you believe AI will ultimately take us to a utopia or dystopia?
I think utopia. Dystopia means AI's taken over, right? And it's taken everyone's jobs, and I think people love what they do too much. And yeah, sure, you've got business leaders that need to make money, and if they can run a business more efficiently, they will. But from what I've seen so far, it's only making the people I work with stronger. And I've never really said to myself, I'd rather have a team of robots, Like, it's the human connection is still really important. AI makes them stronger. When you build a high-performing team, it's people that are augmented. And I don't think AI is going to get to a point where it starts taking away from people in a negative way. I think that's when you start going to dystopia. But it's yet to be seen. You know how much it costs to run these things, like the AI we use. It's like billions of dollars. So whether companies can earn billions of dollars to run the things is yet to be seen. The amount of compute you need is ridiculous. So we'll see if it's actually sustainable and if the products we're using can continue to exist. But, yeah. As no one really knows either. So it's a really interesting time to be alive and be a software engineer. It's like the intelligence revolution is happening, and really really interesting to see where it will end up.